It was Halloween night, and I couldn't wait to go trick-or-treating. I put on my scary ghost costume with a white sheet and cut out 2 holes for my eyes. My mom helped me tie it around my neck, and I grabbed my orange plastic pumpkin pail. I was ready to get some candy. As I walked down the dimly lit street with my friends, the leaves crunched under our feet. We could hear spooky music coming from some houses, and fake cobwebs were everywhere. It felt like we were in a haunted movie, and I loved it. We knocked on the first door, and an old lady with a kind smile handed us some candy. She told us to be careful out there and watch for strangers. I nodded and said, "Thank you." We continued to the next house, then the next and the next. After a while, we came to a house that looked a bit different. It was dark, and the front yard was filled with tombstones and skeletons. We hesitated but decided to knock anyway. A tall man in a vampire costume answered the door. He looked scary but laughed and gave us some candy. But as we turned to leave, he whispered, "Be careful. Not everyone in this town is as friendly as me." We felt a chill run down our spines, but we thought he was just trying to spook us. We continued our trick-or-treating adventure. A few houses later, we noticed something strange. We saw a girl about our age, dressed as a witch, standing alone by the side of the road. She was crying. We decided to check if she was okay. "Are you all right?" I asked. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. My friends and I were trick-or-treating too, but they disappeared. I'm all alone now. We felt bad for her and decided to invite her to join us. We thought it would be more fun if we stuck together. She introduced herself as Cassie and joined our group. As we continued to knock on doors, we noticed that the houses were getting spookier and the people handing out candy seemed stranger. One person had a jack-o'-lantern with a sinister smile and gave us candy shaped like spiders. Another house was covered in spider webs, and the owner was dressed as a creepy clown. It was starting to get late, and we decided to head back home. We walked back to Cassie's house, but it was different from the last time we saw it. The once spooky decorations were now gone, and it looked like a normal house. Cassie was confused. "This is my house, but it doesn't look the same." We were all getting a little nervous. As we approached the front door, we heard a whisper from behind us. It was the man in the vampire costume we'd met earlier. "I told you to be careful. This town isn't what it seems," he said. We turned around and he was gone. Suddenly the door opened by itself, and a strong wind blew through the house. We were scared, but Cassie went inside and we followed her. The inside of the house was even stranger. The walls were covered in strange symbols and there were candles burning everywhere. We heard a voice coming from the dark hallway. "Welcome to the House of Halloween. You're all just in time," the voice said. We followed the voice into a room where we saw something that made our blood run cold. Our missing friends were there, but they were not the same. Their eyes were dark and they had eerie smiles on their faces. They didn't even recognize us. Cassie tried to talk to them, but they didn't respond. The voice from the darkness laughed and said, "They're under our spell now. You can't save them." We were scared, but we had to do something. We ran out of the house as fast as we could. The whole town had changed. It was like a nightmare. The streets were filled with creepy creatures and the houses seemed to twist and turn. We didn't know where to go. We found a group of kids who looked just as scared as we were. They told us they had also encountered the strange house and the creepy voice. We all decided to stick together and try to find a way out of this nightmare. We walked through the twisted streets, avoiding the eerie townspeople who seemed to be under some strange spell. The sky was dark, and it felt like Halloween would never end. Finally, we came across the same house where we had met the man in the vampire costume. He was waiting for us. "You're not like the others," he said. "I can help you escape, but you have to trust me." Desperate to leave this nightmare behind, we agreed to follow him. He led us through a hidden path that took us out of the town. As we walked away from the twisted Halloween town, the man explained that the town was cursed by a powerful witch long ago. On Halloween night, the town transformed into a place of darkness, where people lost themselves to the curse. We were grateful to have escaped, and we thanked the man for helping us. He smiled and said, "Remember, not everything that looks spooky is just for fun on Halloween." We nodded and headed back to our own neighborhood, promised never to forget that terrifying Halloween night. I went trick-or-treating one Halloween night. The moon was bright and the wind rustled the leaves. I wore a spooky ghost costume and my friend Jimmy was a pirate. We were excited to get lots of candies. We knocked on the first house's door. An old lady with crooked teeth and a pointy hat answered. She smiled and gave us candy. But there was something strange about her smile. It made me shiver. We moved to the next house. A man in a werewolf mask opened the door. He looked at us, but it felt like he was looking right through us. He handed us candies and we hurried away. As we walked down the dark street, the houses started to look different. They were getting older, and some had broken windows. We heard whispers in the wind, but no one else was around. I felt a chill in my bones. At the next house, a little girl in a torn-up princess costume opened the door. She didn't speak, just stared at us. We took some candy and left, feeling creeped out. We saw a house with a pumpkin on the porch. It seemed normal, so we rang the bell. A man in a clown mask opened the door. He was covered in paint, but it looked like blood. He laughed in a way that sent shivers down my spine. We grabbed candy and ran away. The night got darker and the streets were almost empty. We came to a house with no lights on. I didn't want to go in, but Jimmy dared me. We went inside and the door closed behind us. The house was filled with strange noises. We heard creaking and whispers. Shadows moved on their own. We called out, but no one answered. We went up the stairs and found a room with a mirror. In the mirror, we saw ourselves, but different. Our faces were pale and we had black eyes. We screamed and ran out. The house was a maze and we were lost. We found a room with a big old chest. We opened it and inside were masks, all different, all creepy. They looked like the ones people were wearing outside. As we left the room, the walls closed in on us. We were trapped. The house was alive and it wanted us to stay. We heard a voice, a ghostly voice, telling us to stay and join the others. But we knew we had to get out. We ran through the maze and the walls seemed to scream at us. Finally, we burst out of the house and it shut behind us. The night had grown even darker and the moon was gone. We were in a different neighborhood, one we didn't recognize. We tried to find our way back home, but the streets were endless, and the houses all looked the same, old and haunted. We couldn't escape. Then from behind us, we heard the laughter. The clown from the house was following us. He kept getting closer, his laugh echoing in the night. We ran, but the streets seemed to stretch on forever. The houses closed in on us, and the clown was right behind us. We couldn't escape, and we couldn't see the end of this Halloween nightmare. I woke up with a start, drenched in sweat. It was just a dream. I was in my own bed, safe and sound. I looked out the window and the sun was shining. Halloween was over and it was just another day. But as I got up, I noticed something on my nightstand. It was a candy, the same one we took from the creepy houses. I knew it wasn't just a dream. Something had followed me back from that nightmare and I knew it would never leave me. It was Halloween night, and I was excited to go trick-or-treating with my friends. We dressed up in spooky costumes. I was a zombie, and my friends were a vampire and a mummy. We went to houses, said, "Trick or treat," and got candy. As it got darker, we decided to visit a house at the end of the street. It was an old, creepy-looking house that nobody ever visited. The front yard was overgrown with tall, tangled weeds, and the windows were all boarded up. I was a little scared, but my friends dared me to go up to the door, so I did. I knocked on the door and it creaked open slowly. There was no one there, but there was a big bowl of candy on a table just inside. It seemed strange, but we thought it was a treat and took some candy. Just as we were leaving, we heard a soft voice whisper, "Trick or treat." We turned around, but there was no one there. We thought it was a joke, so we went on our way. The night was getting spookier, and the wind was blowing through the trees, making weird noises. We came to another house, and this time the porch light was on. We went up and said, "Trick or treat." The door opened, and there was an old lady with a crooked smile. She gave us candy, and I noticed that it was all different shapes and colors. As we were about to leave, the old lady said, "Do you want to play a game?" We agreed, and she led us to the backyard. In the moonlight, I could see strange figures hanging from the trees. They looked like scarecrows, but they were dressed in real clothes, and their faces were hidden by masks. The old lady told us the game was to find a hidden treat in the backyard. We split up and started searching. I felt something soft under a pile of leaves and uncovered a doll made of bones. I screamed and dropped it. My friends found other weird things like a jar of eyeballs and a box of teeth. We were scared and wanted to leave, but the old lady was nowhere to be found. We decided to run back home and leave the treats behind. As we ran, the wind picked up, and we heard strange whispers all around us. It felt like the scarecrow figures were following us. We finally made it home and locked the door. We decided not to go out trick-or-treating again that night. The next morning, we went to the police and told them about the strange house and the old lady. They went to check it out but found nothing. The house was empty, and there were no scarecrow figures or treats in the backyard. We were confused and scared. We went back to our normal lives, but we couldn't forget that creepy Halloween night. As the years went by, I stopped celebrating Halloween and I never went near that old house again. I don't know what really happened that night, but I can't forget the bone doll, the jar of eyeballs, and the whispers in the wind. Halloween will never be the same for me, and I'll always wonder if there are more strange and scary things out there that we can't explain. It was Halloween night and I was super excited. My friends and I had our costumes ready. I was a pirate and they were a witch, a ghost, and a mummy. We couldn't wait to go trick-or-treating. As the sun started to set, we grabbed our bags and headed out. The street was filled with spooky decorations, skeletons, pumpkins, and cobwebs. It was dark and the wind howled through the trees. My heart was pounding, but I was having a blast. We visited a few houses and people were giving us candy. It was awesome. But then someone told us about a mysterious house at the end of the street. They said it was the scariest place in town and no one ever came back from there. My friends and I, being brave, or maybe just curious, decided to check it out. We walked down the creepy street and the house was all dark, except for a single pumpkin on the porch. The door creaked open by itself when we got closer. Inside, it was even spookier. The walls were covered in spiderwebs and there were dusty old pictures. We went further in, and that's when we saw it, a big old mirror. As I looked at my reflection in the mirror, something strange happened. My reflection didn't do what I did. It smiled, but I didn't. I was frozen with fear, and so were my friends. We couldn't move. The mirror started to talk. It said we had to play a game to get out. We had to find the hidden objects in the house. My heart was pounding harder. I didn't want to play, but we didn't have a choice. We split up to search for the objects. I went into the kitchen. It was so creepy with the lights flickering. I found a dusty old book and it looked important. I took it with me. My friends found a creepy doll, a rusty key, and an old lantern. We went back to the mirror and showed the objects. The mirror was pleased, and it let us go. I was so relieved. But as we stepped out of the house, something was different. The street, the houses, everything had changed. It was like we were in a whole new world. We didn't know what to do and we were scared. We saw other kids in costumes like us, but they looked different. They had pale faces and black eyes. They told us that we were stuck here, and the only way out was to play a game. The game was to find hidden candies all over the new world. We had no choice but to play. We split up and started searching. The candies were in the strangest places, on top of trees, inside mailboxes, and even in the middle of the road. As we found more candies, we noticed something strange. The other kids who were playing the game with us started to disappear one by one. It was terrifying. We didn't know where they were going. We kept playing, hoping to find all the candies and get out of this nightmare. But when we finally found the last candy, it was too late. My friends were gone. I was all alone. I wandered through the strange world not knowing what to do. It felt like I had been here for hours. The night seemed to go on forever, and I was getting more scared by the minute. Then I saw a figure in the distance. It was a tall, shadowy figure with a pumpkin head. It slowly moved closer and I could hear its eerie laugh. I turned and ran as fast as I could, but it was right behind me. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to escape. I ran through dark forests, crossed strange rivers, and climbed hills. The pumpkin-headed figure was relentless, always getting closer. Finally, I saw a dim light in the distance. It was the old mirror house. I knew I had to get back to the mirror to escape this nightmare. I ran inside and the mirror was waiting for me. It told me that the only way out was to give it my Halloween candy. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. I handed over all the candies I had collected and the mirror let me go. I stepped out of the mirror house and everything was back to normal. The street, the houses, and my friends were all there. It was like nothing had ever happened. I was so relieved and I ran to my friends. They were all fine and they didn't remember anything about the strange world. I didn't tell them what had happened because I didn't want to scare them. We continued trick-or-treating, and I was just glad to be back in our familiar neighborhood. But I couldn't forget the terrifying adventure I had gone through. That Halloween night, I learned that not all tricks and treats are fun. And sometimes the scariest things are the ones you can't explain. Once, on Halloween night, my friends and I decided to go trick-or-treating. We were all really excited. I dressed up as a spooky ghost with a white sheet over me, and my friends had cool costumes too. As we went from house to house, we noticed one house that looked different. It was old and worn down with peeling paint. The front yard was full of overgrown weeds, and the porch light flickered like it might go out any second. We hesitated, but then dared each other to go up to the front door. When we rang the doorbell, it made a creepy, creaky sound. We waited nervously, wondering if anyone was home. Then the door slowly creaked open by itself. We looked at each other, scared but also curious. We decided to go in. Inside it was dark and smelled musty. There were cobwebs everywhere and the air felt cold. We stepped further into the house, feeling uneasy. Suddenly we heard a voice coming from somewhere. It was a soft, eerie whisper that sent shivers down our spines. "Trick or treat," it said. But there was something strange about the way it sounded. We followed the voice deeper into the house and found a room with a table covered in sweets. It was like a dream for candy lovers. We reached for the treats, but something didn't feel right. The candy seemed to move as if it had a life of its own. One of my friends grabbed a chocolate bar and it turned into a creepy crawling spider in his hand. He screamed and dropped it. Another friend reached for a lollipop and it suddenly burst into flames. We were all terrified, and I wanted to run out of there, but the door had vanished. The whisper came again, stronger this time. "Trick or treat," it said. We realized that the voice was coming from a mirror on the wall. We looked into it, and our reflections weren't our own. They looked like dark, twisted versions of ourselves. We were trapped, and the room started to close in on us. The walls oozed slime, and the ceiling seemed to lower. We knew we had to do something to escape. We tried to break the mirror, but it was like it had a force field protecting it. As the room got smaller and the whispers grew louder, we decided to try saying "trick or treat" to the mirror. It was a long shot, but it was the only thing left to do. The moment we said it, the room stopped closing in on us. The whispers turned into a loud, sinister laughter, and the mirror shattered into pieces. We fell to the floor, gasping for breath. When we got up, we were back outside the creepy house. It was no longer dark and gloomy, but a normal, quiet neighborhood. The house looked just as it had before we went in. We ran away from that house as fast as we could, and we didn't stop until we were back home. We never talked about that night, and we never went trick-or-treating again. To this day, I don't know what happened in that house, but I'll never forget the terrifying Halloween when trick-or-treat turned into something I'd never imagined.